This is the Bates Bobcast, our weekly podcast where we take a look at the week that was in Bates athletics. My name is Aaron Morse, and this week we are celebrating the women's first varsity eights triumph at the 54th head of the Charles Regatta. Plus, the football team's offense came alive at Middlebury, and the volleyball team went undefeated at the Hall of Fame tournament. All that and more coming up on the Bates Bobcast. The rowing teams competed at the 54th annual head of the Charles Regatta on Sunday, with Bates entering 4 boats. The men's first varsity 8 finished 22nd out of 35 boats. The women's varsity 4 finished 13th out of 40 entries, and the women's second varsity 8 took 11th place out of 28 crews. But it was the women's first varsity 8 that turned in the performance of the day, taking first place for the second straight year in the Collegiate Eights. Led by sophomore coxswain Liza Folsom, Bates outpaced runner-up Williams by more than 20 seconds. And for her efforts steering the first varsity 8 to victory, Liza Folsom is our female Bobcat of the week.
Yeah, it was really exciting. It was not that different from last year's. The attitude was all the same. We were all really excited and really hopeful about the result. But yeah, it was definitely very exciting coming down bow number 1, which was completely new for me.
Yeah, so there's people who don't know, that means you go first, right?
Yeah.
So you're the first one in the race. You don't know what's kind of going on necessarily when you cross the finish line. What's that like, mentally?
I mean, we talked a lot about it in the practices before, because we really had to think about pushing ourselves even though there was no one right next to us pushing us. And so it was a lot of we kind of relying on ourselves to make ourselves faster, because not only is there no one in front of you to move up on, but you can barely see the people behind you. So it's hard to use them to push you. So it was a lot of internal motivation, I think, coming from our boat, which was great.
How much separation is there, like, between when you start and when the next boat goes, kind of?
I'd say maybe, 10 seconds. I'm not sure. It's probably 3 lengths of open water between you and the boat behind you. So it's hard to gauge how far they are. Yeah. I mean, once they're closer to you, you can see. But if they're that far away, I'll look back and I couldn't tell if they had moved on us or not. So.
Yeah. So for a coxswain, this is obviously a completely different challenge than in the spring when you're really watching out for those other boats, kind of. In terms of the steering and whatnot, what's that like for a coxswain? Because that really gets a chance for you to kind of shine almost, right?
Yeah, all the coxswains on the team, all the women's coxswains, all the men's coxswains, we have to study the course the week before, and we had a meeting and we talked about it, and it's definitely very interesting, and I think more fun for the coxswains in the fall, in these fall races rather than in the spring. You have to plan your turns. You have to know when you're going to start your turn. You have to tell your rowers to go harder on one side or lighter on the other. So, it's a lot of studying, a lot of thinking ahead to when you want to turn and how you want to do it.
What's maybe the trickiest part of this course?
I think there's this one bridge called Weeks Bridge, which I find the most difficult because the turn and the bridge there's a turn, and then partway through the turn there's a bridge, but you have to finish turning by the time you go through the bridge, and it's just kind of a little bit of an illusion almost, because it looks like you need to turn through the bridge, but you actually need to turn before it, and so you really have to know how far out you should swing, and then you have to start your turn at a specific point, and it's kind of hard to gauge, because it's kind of in the middle of the race, and I don't know, there's a lot of other things happening, so yeah.
For sure. And then you raced on the Charles, you mentioned, in high school once. So you came in here last year, raced again. So this is your 3rd time racing on the Charles. How does it change each time for you? Does it get easier, or the conditions are obviously a little bit different this year, right?
Yeah, I'd say this time steering the course was the hardest time I've had, because when I coxed in high school, I was in a men's 4, which was obviously a little different than a women's 8. Mm-hmm. But with the win this year and everything, it was a bit more difficult, because in a 4 it's much easier to steer, the boat responds more to how you're steering, but in the 8 you really have to tell rowers to power up to get around the turns. So I think it was the most difficult this year, because you're trying to turn one way but the wind's pushing you another, so it was pretty difficult.
And the 1V this year, a mix of rowers, you've worked with basically all of them, so what's the dynamic like with this new boat, at least so far?
It's such a fun boat. We have a great time together. Even when we were walking around the race course before, we're all joking around, having a great time, and we were so excited for this race. We've been thinking about it, talking about it ever since day 1 of the season. So it was really exciting, really rewarding to, cross the line with them.
Do you share any tips? You mentioned the film watching. Did you share any tips with, Elise or Maya or Aiden about what it takes? It was probably their first times on this.
I think it was only Elise's first time. Yeah. And Aiden's, but we all kind of combined our knowledge and helped each other out. Like, Maya knew, I feel like, way more than I did on this course, and so it was really helpful to have all four of them. And even though Elise and Aiden hadn't done the course before, they had still done research, and so they still knew things that I didn't about the course. So having three other people to talk about racing with was definitely helpful and comforting.
Yeah. Well, you're rowing right through the heart of Boston, right? And so Peter says there's hundreds of thousands of people at any given time, possibly. Do you notice the crowds along the shores at all?
Yeah, you definitely do, especially on the warm-up. We were warming up, and Hannah DeBruin, the coxswain from last year, she was standing, alone on one of the turns, and she was just screaming at us, and we weren't even racing yet, and so we were all smiling and laughing. It was really, heartwarming to see her, and then a bunch of other alumni that came on the side, and I could see them. The rowers hopefully couldn't see them because they were looking in the boat, but I glanced over and I saw them all standing there cheering for us, and it's definitely very, comforting to know that you have so many people supporting you and, wanting you to do well, and yeah, it was great.
For sure. So the race ends, you have to kind of sit around and wait, right?
Yeah, they make you cool down for a little bit, so you have to paddle it down and turn around, and so we crossed the line, and the first part of the race had been a little bit rough because of the wind, but by the end the wind had calmed down, and so it was going pretty well, and so we crossed the line after a big sprint. The sprint was great, and so we didn't really say much. We were just kind of paddling it down together, and then we turned around, came back to the dock, and as we were coming in, Mitch, the men's assistant coach, was standing on the dock, and I was like, Mitch, how'd we do? Do you know? And she was holding up a finger, a 1, and we were like, what? What do you mean? Because I didn't know that that's what she was talking about. We were like, what do you mean? She's like, oh, you won. All the results haven't come in yet, but we're pretty sure you won. We were like, what? Are you serious? And there was a lot of screaming on the dock, and then we had to calm ourselves down because the results weren't official yet. So it wasn't until we put the boat down, we asked one of the parents that was standing by the boat, it's oh, how'd we do? And she was like, oh, you won. And then, we went a little crazy.
So now with the head of Charles wrapped up, what's the rest of the fall season like for you?
I think we only have a week or a week and a half left. We have CBB in next weekend, which will be really fun to have one more race. And we have a couple more fun practices, on Thursday we're all going to race each other, have a Bobcat Cup of sorts. But, only about a week left, which is really sad.
Now, I know the rowers in the winter are on the ergs constantly, getting ready for the spring. As a coxswain, what are you doing during the winter to maybe prepare?
We'll be working out with them. There's a lot less you can do when you're on land as a coxswain, but when they're on the ergs, we'll cox them how we do in the boat, and just to keep them together and motivate them. But yeah, you can't really practice your steering on land. So
going back to the head of Charles real quick for the last question here, because it is so famous, especially in New England and in the world of rowing. You grew up in California, right? And so you probably, you raced in high school, but before that, even you probably knew about it. What makes it so special, in your opinion?
I just think the different levels of people are there. I saw a bunch of friends from my high school, but I also saw a bunch of Olympians there. So it's a big range of people. And also everyone that comes out makes it even more special. There are alumni, the families there. And then even I saw a bunch of Bates people that don't even row were there, people in my grade and stuff. And so, I don't know, it's just so great having such support for you there because there's so many people. So there's so many more Bates supporters, which is awesome.
Terrific. Well, Eliza Folsom, our female Bobcat of the week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
After falling to Bowdoin and Middlebury last week, the Bates men's soccer team needs to defeat or tie Colby Wednesday at 8 p.m. on Garcelon Field in order to qualify for the NESCAC tournament. Right before that match, the field hockey team takes on Colby at 6 p.m. on Campus Avenue Field. And for the fourth straight year, Bates must win to qualify for postseason play. Meanwhile, the football team has a big game with the Mules this weekend as well, as Bates looks to defend its CBB title. Kickoff is set for 1 p.m. at Garcelon Field, and things are looking up for the Bobcats after they took Middlebury to the wire last Saturday, falling 35-34. Sophomore quarterback Brendan Costa tossed a career-high 3 touchdown passes, and Bates rallied from 22 points down to pull within 1. But a late interception sealed the win for Middlebury. Head coach Malik looks back on the Bobcats' closest game of the season so far. Fifth quarter here on the Bates Bobcast with the head coach of the Bobcats, Malik Hall. And Coach Hall, 1-point loss at Middlebury this past weekend, the most points the team has scored since 2014 in a single game. It was being asked on Twitter by some fans. I'm sure you've been thinking about it yourself this weekend, so I'll get it right out of the way. If you had to do it over again, down by 2, do you go for 2 after that touchdown instead of going for 1 with 8 minutes left?
I'm a firm believer in not chasing points. And because the team that we have, I want to build everything that we can build positive. Any positive action that we can create on that field, especially being that we were in the fourth quarter playing well, was the only concern I had. So, if you look back at it, hindsight's 2020, we don't get the 2 points. Now it's a 2-point situation, which ultimately the field goal, we had an opportunity to win with a field goal 2 times within 8 minutes. If you fast forward to how you have to come out of not getting an extra point offensively and how you handle that energy defensively, like going for 2 with 8 minutes left in the game, and we have the big momentum, like not getting it slows your momentum. But if you go through process and protocol, kick it until now, we're at the end, and definitively we have to do something different to win the game, which ultimately resulted in you having the ball last, having to get a stop last. I think everything that we wanted to happen in that game happened, regardless whether we went for 2 or not. But for me, it's about keeping momentum. And, the field goal, kicking an extra point is 1 point. Trying to go for 2 to tie it, yeah, we could have been in a tie game, and it could have been in an overtime. But again, there's a negative result that can come from that can stop the momentum that we've captured in the fourth quarter. And not to mention, this was the best second half we played throughout the whole year. So why put an element in there by chasing 1 point that was going to come down to the end anyway, when we're riding high? When you're riding high, ride high. And sometimes doing too much, or i.e. chasing points, is a way that you can buzzkill it all and can swing the pendulum of momentum back to the defense or back to the opponent by them not allowing you to tie it up. So that was where I felt. I believed in the team for 4 quarters. They played 4 quarters, and ultimately, we talk about playing 4 quarters, having a chance to win the game in the fourth quarter, and I think we did that not once but twice within 8 minutes. So the other part is to not panic, to not feel pressured, to keep poised, and those are all of the elements that I'm talking to our team about. And to rush to go for 2, and you got 8 minutes left on the clock, and our defense only gave up 1 touchdown in the second half. And for that matter, has been making them punt, and we were turning it over. There's no reason to force anything. Let the game play itself out and let your team play.
Defensively, what was the biggest difference you noticed from the start of the game where Middlebury was sprinted out to that 22-point lead to down the stretch where, as you mentioned, they got some key stops?
Whenever you give up big plays, it's hard to win. It's too hard to win, and it's certainly too hard to win when you give up big plays. Giving up the 3rd and 15 naked across the middle of the field, that's not a coverage. In fact, that's not a defense. That's a mental lapse. And whenever you have a mental lapse like that on 3rd and 15, one, it doesn't look good defensively, and it certainly doesn't make any impact for confidence in the first half, for our offense to rally behind us, because that's when you're supposed to be getting off the field. That's when the advantage is to the defense. And for that to end in a 75, 80-yard touchdown, whatever the distance was, that was disheartening. That's 7 points. The second touchdown was on another 3rd down, okay? And it's a wide-open guy again down the middle of the field. That's not something Middlebury did. That's all self-inflicted wounds. We handicapped 14 points in the first half. When you think about, that's normally our best half of football defensively. And if you put together what we did in the second half, and we don't give up 2 easy big play for touchdowns, I mean, you're looking at a completely different dynamics and completely. So you talk about 1 point.
Yeah.
Like 1 point doesn't lose you the game. 1 point don't win you the game. It's those plays before it became a 1 point game that gave that game what gave the complexity of that game. It's scoring and not making your extra point, getting your extra point blocked. Like those are self-inflicted things that Bates can control. Mm-hmm. Bates did not control that. And because we didn't control it, like playing our process and not forcing it and doing what we do, we lost by 1, unfortunately. And again, with our opportunity to make it right in the second half, we had to get a critical stop with 1 timeout, which meant they couldn't get a first down. The base Bobcat posse did that on defense. 2 different occasions they go 3 and out before that, and unfortunately our offense just shot themselves in the foot with 2 penalties. And you got the ball last, and you start your drive off with two penalties. You're looking at 2nd and 15, 3rd and 17. Like that's not how you go and win a game. So just to double down on a 1 point loss did not make the difference on whether we should go for 2 or not.
Right.
It was all of the things that led up to being a 1 point loss.
And then offensively, Costa finally really broke free with his legs, ran for over 100 yards. What do you see from him in terms of not only passing for 3 touchdowns, but also being able to run the ball quite a bit?
Yeah, I think he's starting to trust his offensive line, trust his arm. I think if he starts to throw the ball like he did more often, more on time, more in rhythm, the coverage has to get deeper. The coverage has to drive on different concepts and routes. And it allows us to create plays for him in the run game. But if he's not letting the ball go and he's not throwing it on time, like I dare you to run. And if they're going to dare him to run and that's the only thing he results to when it's drop back pass, it doesn't make it hard to defend him. But when he trusts his arm, he trusts the timing of the offense, his line trusts him, he trusts the line, and he trusts the timing and the speed and the depth of routes and receivers. I think he has a dynamic arm. He's a dynamic runner, and I think the more acquainted he gets with our offense, the better he'll become, and the more dynamic he'll become. But that's a process in itself. But I was pleased that our conversation earlier in the week was, listen, man, if you go down, let's go down throwing it. Let's be a gunslinger, because if you go down and it ends in a pick, guess what? That means you feel confident enough to let it rip to a position or to an area of the zone or to a receiver to say, I'm going to make the throw, opposed to having any doubt, hesitant about the throw and then try to run with it. That was a win, even though it ended in a pick. It ended in how we talked about, if it's going to end, let's let it end with your arm. And the throw that he was going to make was wide open, but the linebacker made a heck of a play on it. And that's when you have to be able to teach players, right? Teach players that this is another player who practices, and he made a play on you. Not that the read was wrong. None of everything that you did was right. But that's a learning moment. That's a lesson behind, not what I would like to call a mistake, a lesson behind trusting your coaching, trusting your eyes, and trusting your ability, and trusting all that, and it's still not working out. That's a learning lesson.
The 2 deep touchdown passes, that one to Jackson Hayes was quite the throw, I thought, and Hayes was just wide open. But Marcus Ross is catching traffic. I was like, I said out loud, I was watching the game, like, he caught that? What did you see on the play?
It was a beautiful thing to see our offense just click. Mm-hmm. Formationally, it's still the same. Pass plays are still the same, but you started to see them trust each other out there. And trust for an offense and timing is almost a handicap or the boost or the juice. And if you don't have it, it will handicap you. And if you have it, it gives you a boost of juice. And when he threw the deep ball to Jackson, he didn't necessarily see Jackson. He had to trust Jackson would be at the landmark. Mm-hmm. When he threw the ball to Ross 2 different occasions, the one for the touchdown in traffic, he had to throw it up at a trajectory where he trusted Ross would go up and catch it. And it was in traffic. The second throw that he had to Ross was covered up and he was on a scramble and he threw Ross open. He trusted Ross to find the ball and the DB wouldn't find it. That's timing and trust, and that comes with time, you know what I mean? And I think they saw themselves get better this week. Our job is to double down on that, not take steps backwards, not to add more into our offense, but to double down and rep it more and more and more. And the more reps that we can get at it, the more fluid we can read it, and the more fluid we can deliver it in hopes that it causes production like it did this week.
What was your main message to the team right after the game's over? Because obviously they know they played better than they had the previous week, but at the same time, still a 1-point loss.
The message was, listen, we're not ready to beat an opponent because we're still beating ourselves. Like, the opponent, week in and week out, they happen to wear another color. It happens to register in the record book. But ultimately, it's not about what they do. It's about what we do. And we had the ball in the last quarter, 2 different occasions to go down and win the game. And bottom line, we didn't. And we didn't because of what we did, not what they did. The last touchdown, the third quarter touchdown, we gave up defensively. That was off of a 3-penalty drive. So we gave up 35 yards almost just in penalties. It's too hard to win, to play an opponent and beat the opponent when you're playing against yourself and trying not to beat yourself. So the message is, listen, until we learn how to control ourselves and be disciplined in the fourth quarter or in the tight margins of a game like that, it can't ever be about beating another team if we're consistently beating ourselves. We are constantly playing against ourselves and, unfortunately, the culture that has been here for years. So, we have to beat the culture and we have to be able to not beat ourselves. Or, in other words, beat the demons that we create by penalties, by not being disciplined, by lack of execution or focus. And someone also told me we haven't beat Middlebury in 30 years. So that's a culture that we're playing against as well. So on top of playing against the team who is out to beat you, you have a culture that it's telling you can't win. And you have to coach your mindset to say, I can do this in a critical moment, and that is on me to hold the line and not false start and not jump off sides and not lose my eyes and where they should be in my keys. That's all a process of learning, and unfortunately we're learning that process on live time.
Well, this week, the CVB series starts with Colby coming to town. Coach Cosgrove, you, of course, are familiar with him from your days playing at UMass, right? So what are your thoughts on squaring off with him and the Mules this weekend?
I don't want to be as cliche, but it's where we are. We can't worry about, Coach Cosgrove is going to put together a great game plan, I'm sure. How they see our team will also be interesting. But ultimately where we are, we just can't, we can't make this about the CBB, though that is a byproduct of where we are and what we do. This has to be about the culture that we're playing against and ourselves. Kobe happens to be the team of the week. The quarterback and running back are really good. I think their offensive line is very scrappy. I think defensively they don't mind mixing it up, getting in your face at receiver and pressing you, playing some man coverage and blitzing you. But outside of what they do schematically and us being prepared and preparing our kids for it, I don't want to get into with our guys what Kobe is, because there's so many things that we're still finding out about ourselves that's more prevalent and more apparent in games that we just haven't clicked in those areas. And that's the focus point for now on out, because if it's about the other team and we're beating ourselves, then let's take care of ourselves. It's like mental health. Like, this is athletic health. Like, we have to make sure that we can put the best mentally athletic, healthy team out there, and we can't do it if we're bogged down by their threats, because they have threats. But we have some internal threats that we have to take care of to be competitive.
All right, Coach Hall, thanks so much.
Thank you, and again, it's a great day to be a Bobcat.
Costa turned in a strong performance Saturday, but our male Bobcat of the week is first-year wide receiver Jackson Hayes. He caught 3 passes for career-high 63 yards, and he hauled in his first career touchdown reception.
We kind of just said we were going to throw a bomb downfield, going to test it out. We were running a lot, and so we wanted to surprise him with a shot downfield. And I guess I just called my name, and Acosta threw a good ball right to the landmark, and it worked out.
When you see that ball flying through the air, what's going through your mind?
It had some hang time. It was definitely in the air for a while. I was just trying to catch up to the ball. It felt like it was in the air for a few seconds, and I was just trying to get under it. I was worried that I wasn't going to get under it, but I just kept going, and it happened.
Landed right in your hands, right? Yeah, fairly easy.
Right in the breadbasket.
Yeah. And then, as a first-year wide receiver coming in, how has your relationship with Costa developed in terms of developing that chemistry between QB and wide receiver?
I mean, it's definitely important chemistry to have chemistry between the wide receivers and the quarterback, and it's been pretty good. I felt like Costa has pretty good chemistry with the receivers. We eat together, we hang out together during practice. We kind of talk what's open, what he sees, what we see, and that's kind of the key to having good chemistry. And so we're still figuring it out. Obviously, it's a new offense, so it's tough to have good chemistry with a new offense as well coming in, but it's definitely coming along, and I think we'll figure it out.
You've also factored in the return game this year as well. Is that something you're used to doing from high school?
Yeah, I returned kicks in high school. It's a good time. We're still figuring that out too.
Well, tell us a little bit more about your time in high school. First of all, when did you start playing football? How did you first get into it? And then when you got to high school, when did you realize you wanted to play in college?
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't start playing tackle football, until freshman year of high school. My parents were a little bit against tackle football, and so luckily I had a great high school coach who convinced them to let me play. And then, I started playing freshman year. I was on JV freshman year, and then sophomore year I got bumped up to varsity. And that was kind of the first thing I started doing, was returning kicks in high school before I really got on the field. I played a little slot receiver.
Well, and then when you decided you wanted to play in college and maybe what attracted you to Bates?
I was originally going to try to play basketball in college, actually, and then I went to, a camp, basically, and there was a lot of NESCAC schools there, and Bates was one of them. And it was just a football camp, and I was like, I might as well just go. I really liked Bates, and then kind of just kept going through the recruiting process and ended up here. Being
from California, coming to Maine, no problem for you? Or?
No, actually, it's been a great transition. I thought it was going to be a lot harder than it's been. The coaching staff is awesome. Everyone on the team is awesome. It's made it a very easy transition, or a lot easier than what I expected. It's nice having a lot of people around that support you, the campus that supports you, and friends and coaches that help you out along the way.
Were you already familiar with the NESCAC growing up? I mean, being from the West Coast, or was it kind of new to you going through the recruiting process?
It was definitely new to me. I knew of some of the schools in the NESCAC, but I wasn't super familiar with kind of the networking between them and how they compare. So it was definitely, I learned a lot through the recruiting process, looking at different schools. But it's a really great league. I like how it's high academic, and also very competitive athletically, and I think it's a good balance between the two.
So growing up in California, who are some NFL players who you kind of admired from a playing perspective?
Ooh, NFL. I didn't really have an NFL team growing up until my Rams are undefeated now. So
right.
So that's good. But I definitely like Todd Gurley. I don't really watch a lot of NFL, more basketball, but
okay.
The Rams are doing well, so it's always good to hop on that train.
For sure. Did you watch college football much? Or?
Yeah, I'm a big UCLA fan, so they're not having the best year this year, but both my parents went there, so I've been a UCLA fan growing up. So that's kind of my football team would be UCLA.
Gotcha. So not necessarily watching that much professional football, but as a wide receiver, is there anyone you model your game after? Or are you just trying to do it on, your original Jackson Hayes?
Yeah, I mean, I don't try to model my game off of anyone too much. One, because I kind of like being who I am, and two, I just don't watch that much football. So I definitely I watch a lot of videos of like people running routes, but I wouldn't say there's someone who I would model my game after. Gotcha.
So obviously the CBB series starts this week with Colby. I'm sure the upperclassmen have spoken much about this rivalry between Bates, Colby, and Bowdoin.
I mean, our goal hasn't really been like the state championship. It was kind of doing well the whole season. We don't really want to put too much weight on a certain game or a certain couple of games. Honestly, we're kind of taking it week by week. We're not really care. We're kind of worried about us. I feel like, and the coaches feel like, and everyone who is kind of around the program feels like it's us who we're kind of beating ourselves. It's not really our opponents that are causing like some of the mistakes. It's more mental mistakes. And so especially what we've been harking on this past couple of weeks is kind of just focusing on ourselves, trying to eliminate some of those mental mistakes, and kind of figuring out our offense, figuring out our defense and our special teams. So we're kind of more just focused on us, not really worrying about who we're playing. And that's kind of the goal that has been structured the past couple of weeks.
Right, and that comes obviously from head coach Malik Hall. What's he been like as the head man this year?
Oh, he's been awesome. He's really helped me out personally, just kind of with the transition football-wise. He's really helped me out in all aspects. It's always nice having someone who has high energy. He's always like, he comes in and he just smiles, and you're just like, all right, it's going to be a good day. His smile is definitely infectious. I was talking to one of my friends about it the other day. Just when he comes into the room, there's an energy and kind of an excitement to go out and play.
The volleyball team improved to 12-7 on the season by going 3-0 over the weekend at the Hall of Fame tournament, defeating Smith, the Coast Guard Academy, and Bridgewater State. Senior Claire Naughton was named to the all-tournament team, thanks in part to her season-high 14 kills and 6 service aces against Coast Guard, and her 7 kills, 6 digs, and 2 aces against Bridgewater State. Talking some Bates volleyball with Claire Naughton here on the Bobcast. And first of all, Claire, Hall of Fame tournament over the weekend, 3-0 for the Bobcats over the course of 2 days. What was clicking so well for the team, you thought?
It's just really fun to get to play that much volleyball back to back to back. You don't have a lot of time to think about what happened the point before or what you're going to do the next point. You're kind of just really in the moment and moving forward as best you can. And I think we just really, as a team, vibed, and everyone was doing their job and doing it really well. And it was a really great atmosphere.
Now you got a midweek match tonight, right? We're talking on Tuesday tonight against Husson, and then, of course, the big NESCAC weekend. How are you going to use this match here on Tuesday to gear up for, Amherst and Trinity?
We like to look at every match as its own individual thing, and we never overlook any of our opponents. I think tonight is going to be a really big time for us to just kind of keep working on vibing and feeling good and working together as a team, and we're just really excited. We're coming up in our last few weeks of volleyball, and it's just every match that you get to play is such a privilege and such a gift, and so it's really exciting to get to keep going.
As a senior, you've gotten to see the program develop along with, head coach Melissa Duran, because your first year here was her first year here too, right? So how have you seen that growth?
I think culturally she's done some really amazing things for the program. We are a team that every single day in the gym we're striving competitively to make everyone better. There's such camaraderie and there's such unity, but then there is also this a little bit of I'm gonna outplay you, I'm gonna win this, I'm gonna win that, and I think that's what has really helped push this program forward. Is every person takes their job really seriously and they play with a lot of grit and a lot of heart and a lot of integrity.
So you play at middle hitter. How does that maybe differ from the other attack positions like outside hitter and whatnot?
The big point of middle hitter is that you're running things a little quicker, and you're mostly trying to catch teams on their heels a little bit. So we've really been working our middles in transition and just being available all the time. And so I know that I and my other 2 middle hitters, Angel Achipwe and Riley Murphy, are working so hard every single day, and our setters are great and work with us, and just it's been really fun to try to be a more middle offensive team.
You mentioned Achipwe. She came in last year as a first year, made a big impact right away. What have you seen from her? You're a little bit more experienced perhaps, but what have you talked with her about what's going to take to continue her success here at Bates?
Angel's great. She puts down a really heavy ball. She's a really hard worker. I think it'll be really exciting to see her grow with the program, and I don't know. We mostly just talk about how much fun it is.
Well, obviously, yeah, a lot of fun here, but also obviously you're successfully academically, all academic last year. How do you balance the classroom and the dedication it takes for volleyball?
I always say that my most productive semester is when I'm in season because I don't have time to be anything but productive. I really love playing volleyball, and I know that it's something I'm really lucky to get to do in a college setting, and so I take it really seriously to balance both my time in the gym working on my game and then my time anywhere on campus trying to do homework.
Right. Well, tell us how you first got into volleyball growing up.
My high school, Darien High School, had a really successful volleyball program, and I was always a really tall kid, and in middle school the assistant coach subbed one of our classes, and he came up to me at the end and he said, "You're trying out for volleyball when you get to high school." And so that was that. And I've played ever since, and I love it. It's really shaped me as a person and shaped my work ethic and kind of how I view myself and how I value myself, and I'm really disappointed to be rounding up my time as a volleyball player.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, being a senior, have you started looking at, after graduation, what your thoughts are or anything?
That's a scary question. Not as seriously as I should. Right now, I'm mostly trying to just get the most out of my last couple weeks of volleyball, and then I'm really going to buckle down and think about life afterwards. But for now, it's been kind of fun to just play volleyball and be with my teammates and be with my coach and have that really great atmosphere that we have in the gym.
All right, Claire Naughton, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Next time on the Bates Bobcast, we'll recap the final week of the regular season for our soccer, field hockey, and volleyball programs, plus any NESCAC quarterfinal matches that may take place Saturday. We'll also talk about the football team's showdown with Colby and how our cross-country teams perform in the NESCAC championships, taking place in Boston's Franklin Park on Saturday afternoon. All that and more next time on the Bates Bobcast.